Let's go through the stories inside the papers in a bit more detail. And joining me to do that is Harrison Griffiths, a political commentator with Young Voices UK. Harrison, good morning.
Hi, Rosie. How are you?
Really well. The photographs on the front pages of some of the papers and inside of this march yesterday are quite something. The Times puts it as tens of thousands show unity with British Jews. What did you make of this?
It's heartwarming to see. Over the last 6 or 7 weeks, I can imagine that it has been very alarming for people, across this country to think that Jewish folks in the UK do not feel safe. They do not feel belonging. Over the last, 120, 130 years in particular, there have been very few enclaves of this planet where it has been, generally speaking, safe and okay to be a Jewish person. And almost all of those places have been in Israel, the United States of America, or the United Kingdom. And over the last 6 or 7 weeks, the UK's status on that list has been compromised. So we can all only hope that this is a first step towards, firmly sending the message to every single person in the UK who is Jewish or loves a Jewish person that you are welcome and we stand in solidarity with you.
How do you feel, though, about the fact that people walked through the streets saying, we demand zero tolerance for anti-Semitism?
Yeah, I mean, it's the correct message. We've seen over the last 6 or 7 weeks in the aftermath of the October 7th attack by Hamas that, there has been a really sort of alarming groundswell of anti-Semitic sentiments at the very least, or at least even outright hatred in a lot of cases, both in this country and across Europe, the United States. And it's important to restate the message that when we say things like never again, we mean it, and that there is no inevitability about tolerance. There's no inevitability about eradicating the oldest hatred, which is anti-Semitism. We consistently need to remind every generation that anti-Semitism is intolerable, and that all people, regardless of their faith and ethnicity, should be welcome in this country and feel safe.
I think the challenge is why there had to be a reminder in the first place. There's lots of analysis of this inside the paper. Front page of the Telegraph. Sunak's deal with Suella Braverman. We heard Suella's side of the story when she said, giving that absolutely blistering resignation letter, saying we had this deal and you broke it. What have we learned actually about what kind of agreement there was between the former Home Secretary and the Prime Minister?
Well, it still seems to me to be a bit unclear. There seems to be, as you might expect, a bit of a gulf between the two of them. But it seems from this report that what is clear is that there were considerations about perhaps stopping students from staying in the UK after this is foreign students staying in the UK after their studies are completed, capping the number of family members that immigrants can bring with them, doubling the salary threshold from £26,000 for an independent work visa in the UK. But perhaps Suella's telling of the story is that the agreement might have gone a little bit further than that. I'm not sure.
Look, migration, legal migration is something that Conservatives don't seem to be united on at all. And today we're actually going to be hearing from the new Home Secretary, answering questions from his own MPs about what the Conservatives are going to do to try and curb migration. There seems to be some concerns, and this is sort of being reported in the politics section of the Times this morning, within the Conservative Party, that if they don't get a handle on this, they might fuel appetite for the far right.
Yeah, absolutely. And it mentions perhaps a groundswell of votes and support for organisations like the Reform Party. I'm not quite sure I'd call the Reform Party far right, but if that political consideration is very much at the forefront of the minds of Conservative MPs and members, it's not the first time. We've already seen that this question, when it manifested in the form of Brexit, was a real push for the Conservative Party to become more Eurosceptic because they were concerned about losing votes to then UKIP. And that may very well be rearing its head again. It seems, though, that if they are worried about the timing of elections and whatnot, that peak net migration. The net migration has probably peaked. There are a couple of programs, particularly the open invitation to British nationals abroad in Hong Kong, for example, that are pushing up the numbers beyond the normal trend, and so it's quite possible that we'll see it come back down before the next election. But the numbers for them, but the Conservative Party, politically speaking, are not necessarily great at the moment. So I can understand the panic.
Robert Jenrick seems to be in support of quite a lot of Suella Braverman's strategies.
Yeah, he is indeed, and it seems like he's going to be, he's trying at least to take the lead on influencing the Prime Minister to implement some of these measures, like increasing the salary threshold for skilled worker visas, for capping the number of family members you can bring over. I'm not sure necessarily that this is going to be able to make a difference in time if they're trying to, create a quick fix. I'm not sure there is a quick fix to this. But it will be interesting to see the direction they go, because there's been a lot of rhetoric for many years now about cutting legal immigration, dealing with illegal immigration, etc. And the government, regardless of where you stand on the substance of the issue, the government doesn't actually seem to be willing or able, or some combination of the two, to actually implement what they've promised. So for people wanting a decline in net migration, may be left wanting for a little while longer.
Yeah, it seems to be that they're in a muddle over, a muddle, I think, puts it quite politely, over illegal migration and legal migration. They haven't got a handle on either of those. We'll hear more a little bit later when James Cleverly will face Conservative MPs a little bit later on this afternoon, and Terry Stiasny will give us an overview of what we can expect in about 10 minutes' time. Front page of the Telegraph, Harrison, council employees with second jobs are being investigated by a government fraud squad after, perhaps unsurprisingly, some people have been caught moonlighting whilst working from home.
Yeah, this is a really rather staggering story, and I'd be interested to see, as this investigation unfolds, to what extent, crucially, it's true. But yeah, I mean, you're talking about the council telling their employees post-COVID that it's good to aim for 60% attendance in the office, and that when you've created a culture like that, you're going to have a lot of working from home. And I suppose it's a bit of a damning indictment on the allocation of resources within local government, that there are people who feel that they have a job where, so long as they are not working in an office, they can adequately do that job, which is supposed to be full-time, and do another one on the top of it. Mm-hmm. I think if you want to condemn people for potentially, they use the term time theft, don't they? For splitting time evenly between two full-time jobs. If you want to condemn people for that, that's fine. But I also think there's probably something to answer for in government, that people feel that they probably could get away with this. Yeah,
it sounds like there is capacity to be more efficient. It just depends which job you're doing. It will be interesting to see how that develops. The Booker Prize has been announced, and there is this sort of really wonderful story inside the Times, writing up the words of Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, who of course was held prisoner by Iran for 6 years. Well, what's quite interesting is she said, look, I couldn't create a world for my own. So these are some of the books that helped me sort of live in someone else's. And she's talked about The Handmaid's Tale, and the fact that sort of gave her solace. It is another dystopian novel that's won the Booker Prize. It's called Prophet Song. And Harrison, sort of for you, if there was going to be a book that you could sort of lose yourself in, maybe one book that you would really cherish, which would it be?
Well, I mean, if it was a novel, it would definitely be Anthem, which is a book by Ayn Rand about also a dystopian society where the concept of individuality has been eradicated, and humanity has descended into a new dark age and is ruled over by a rather misguided council of the experts, as we might call them. I think that would probably be the one to sustain me. It's very impressive, I guess, that Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe was living literally the consequences of a dystopian society where women are relegated to second-class citizens. Being a dual national, no matter how loyal or culturally embedded you might be in your country, is considered suspicious. Despite being in awful conditions and away from her young daughter and her husband for 6 years, she still found the strength to smuggle this very important book in, take solace from it, and also try and spread the message to the other women who were locked up with her.
Yeah, it is a wonderful write-up inside the Times. Well worth a read this morning. Some research that has been written up in the paper is, I don't know what to make of this. It's sort of quite miserable, and I'm afraid it is morbid. We don't really talk about death, but death of the funeral is the headline. Just 47% of us want one when we're gone. What was sort of the crux of this research, Harrison?
So this really shocked me. There was an enormous religious divide between people who say that they are planning to have a funeral after they pass and those who wouldn't, and perhaps even wouldn't attend one. So it found that 76% of people who attend a place of worship at least once a month want a funeral, compared with 38% who don't attend religious services once a month. That is a quite staggering divide, and one that I certainly haven't noticed anecdotally among friends and family I occasionally talk to about this. I'm personally very keen to have a funeral when hopefully long into the future I pass on, and I don't think I know anybody that doesn't.
I have to say, I thought it was an assumed thing rather than something you debate about whether you would do it or not. It's less than half of people who want a funeral when they die. The Archbishop of Canterbury is warning that society is forgetting about how to cope with loss. Would you agree with that?
Well, I mean, quite possibly. As I say, reading this morning came as a real surprise to me because, whenever this has come up, and it does actually come up relatively frequently, morbid as that might sound, in conversations with friends and family over the years, I've really never found anybody that doesn't want to have a funeral. So in my experience, people are very sort of positive about it. They want to have celebratory funerals. They want everybody to have a get together and think of the happy memories and go on a jolly up or whatever. So I think, at least in my experience, no, people are very welcoming of coping with loss and how to deal with that in a positive, constructive way.
Yeah,
but indeed, if this survey is correct, I have no reason to think it's not. Perhaps people are losing the ceremonial heritage, I suppose, that we have when it comes to celebrating and coping with the loss of loved ones.
Yeah, and because the alternative is just sort of not to mark it, which feels very strange. It'd be interesting to have your perspective on this. You can text me 87222, start your message with the word Times. Have you ever sort of fathomed not having a funeral? I know it's a pretty miserable story first thing on a Monday. Harrison, thank you so much. Harrison Griffiths, political commentator with Young Voices UK, going through the stories inside the papers with me.